The House on Blackwood Hill, Part 3, The House Returns. The villagers thought it was over. They had watched the fire, the smoke, the earth splitting to swallow the mansion. They whispered among themselves, relieved that the cursed house was finally gone. But Eliza knew the truth. The diary lay on her pillow that night, though she had left it in the ruins. Its pages, once blank, were now filled with words written in her own hand, describing things she had not yet done, places she had not yet been. The first line read, "The house never dies, it only moves." The new home weeks passed. Eliza was taken in by a distant relative in a neighboring town. They gave her a small bedroom in their cottage, warm and bright, with flowers painted on the walls. For a time, she almost believed she was safe. She went to school, though the other children avoided her. She smiled politely when neighbors asked about her parents, repeating the story she'd been told to say. They died in an accident. The house burned with them inside. But every night when she closed her eyes, she heard the tapping. 3 slow, 2 quick, 3 slow, 2 quick. And every morning the diary contained more writing. One entry chilled her most. "The house will come for you when you are ready. It will rise again, wherever you go. The hill grows under your feet." The return. It happened in the spring. Eliza woke one morning to find the cottage strangely silent. Her relatives were gone, their beds empty, their shoes still by the door. Outside, the village seemed deserted. She stepped into the street, barefoot. The world had changed overnight. Mist rolled through the lanes thicker than she had ever seen. And there, rising behind the cottages, stood Blackwood Hill. The house was on top of it, whole again. Its windows gleamed with firelight, as if mocking her. Its iron gate stood wide open. Eliza clutched the diary, her hands shaking. On its newest page, the words burned into the paper. "Welcome home." Inside. Again. The front door opened before she touched it. The house had not only returned, it had grown. The halls were longer, the ceilings higher, the shadows deeper. The portraits had changed too. Where once strangers stared down at her, now familiar faces watched. Daniel, Marianne, even Eliza herself, eyes hollow and lifeless. The air buzzed with whispers, thousands of voices murmuring over one another, rising and falling like waves. "Why me?" she whispered into the dark. The voices answered as one, "Because you belong to us." The Feast of Shadows. The dining room was set as though for a grand banquet. Plates of steaming food covered the long oak table. Roast meat, glistening fruit, bread fresh from the oven. The smell was intoxicating, and at the head of the table sat her parents. Daniel smiled, though his skin sagged like melted wax. Marianne raised her glass, though her eyes were black voids. "Join us, Eliza," they said together, their voices layered with hundreds more. Eliza backed away. "You're not real." Her mother's head tilted unnaturally. "Real enough to feed the house." The portraits on the walls began to scream, mouths stretching wide. The food on the table rotted before her eyes, crawling with maggots. Her parents stood, reaching out with hands too long, fingers sharpened to claws. Eliza fled into the hall. The core. The house herded her like prey. Doors slammed shut, corridors twisted. At last she was forced into the one place she had never dared to enter. The locked room. This time, the door opened easily. Inside, the walls pulsed like veins. The floor was not wood, but flesh, slick and beating with a rhythm that echoed her own heart. In the center stood a pit, black and bottomless, whispering in every voice she had ever heard. She looked down and saw faces. Hundreds, thousands of faces, staring up from the dark. Her father, her mother, Margaret Whitfield, every child from the photographs. And deeper still, something vast and shapeless, its eyes glowing like coals. The house itself. The choice. The voices rose to a roar. "Jump, Eliza. Join us. End your fear. The house will keep you safe forever." Her legs trembled. Part of her wanted to give in, to stop fighting, to sink into the pit and join the others. But then she saw the diary in her hand. Its pages fluttered wildly, words shifting, rewriting themselves. A single line burned through. If the house is a beast, then its heart must be destroyed. Her eyes lifted to the pit. The heart was below. She knew it, and she knew what she had to do. The final act. Eliza turned and ran, not out of the house, but deeper into it. The corridors shifted, walls folding, floors tilting, but she followed the pull of the diary. It led her back to the basement, to the carved door that had once burned. It was whole again, waiting. She struck a match, but this time the flame did not catch. The wood laughed at her, mocking. "No," she whispered, "not fire. Blood." She drew the small knife she had hidden in her dress, a keepsake from her mother's sewing kit. With trembling hands, she cut her palm. Blood dripped onto the carvings. The door screamed. It shuddered, splintered, burst open. The pit yawned beneath her, wider than before. She saw the beast's true form now, an endless tangle of limbs, mouths and eyes, all writhing, all hungry. "Eliza," it roared, "you are mine." She lifted the diary high. Its pages burst into flame on their own, white fire consuming every word. The beast howled, recoiling. With all her strength, she hurled the burning book into the pit. The explosion shook the hill. The house convulsed, walls splitting, ceilings collapsing. The beast shrieked as the diary burned within it, light searing through its endless body. Eliza clung to the stair rail as the floor disintegrated. Smoke and fire swallowed everything. And then, silence. The aftermath. When Eliza opened her eyes, she was lying on damp grass. The hill was gone. The house was gone. Only a crater remained, smoldering and empty. The villagers found her there. They asked no questions. Perhaps they knew the truth could not be spoken. Eliza grew older. She moved far away, changed her name, built a life. She never told anyone about the house, about the voices, about the beast beneath the hill, but sometimes at night she heard it still. 3 slow taps, too quick. 3 slow, too quick. And once, in the reflection of a dark window, she thought she saw the diary on the sill, waiting. Epilogue. Blackwood Hill lies empty now. Nothing grows there, not even weeds. People avoid it, whispering of the girl who survived. But sometimes travelers report a light flickering in the mist, a shadow of a house where none should be. And if you stand close enough, if you listen carefully, you might hear the faint sound of tapping. 3 slow, 2 quick. The house never dies, it only waits. It. The House on Blackwood Hill. Part 2. The Basement and the Locked Room. The house had taken Daniel. For 3 nights afterward, Marianne refused to accept it. She searched every inch of the basement, calling his name into the shadows until her voice cracked. Neighbors suggested he had abandoned them, but Eliza knew better. She had heard the scream. She had seen the door slam shut. She had smelled the breath of the house as it exhaled through its rotting boards. On the 4th morning, Marianne stopped searching. She began speaking as if Daniel were still present, setting his place at the table, folding his clothes as though expecting him to return. Her eyes glazed when Eliza tried to remind her of what had happened. The house had taken more than Daniel. It had taken her mother's mind. Eliza was alone now. The tunnels below, the basement was not like the rest of the house. Its walls were stone, slick with moisture, and the air reeked of rot. Eliza forced herself down the creaking steps one morning while Marianne sat humming upstairs. Daniel's flashlight still lay on the bottom stair, its battery long dead. She carried her own, the beam cutting through the damp darkness. The basement stretched deeper than she expected. Narrow corridors branched off like veins, some blocked by fallen beams, others swallowed by shadow. On the far wall, she found something new, a door. Low and narrow, half hidden behind shelves of broken jars. Unlike the others in the house, this one had no knob, just a ring of iron and carvings etched deep into the wood. Symbols, circles and lines interwoven, patterns that made her stomach twist. She had seen them before, in the margins of Margaret Whitfield's diary. When she reached out, the door pulsed with warmth. Something behind it stirred, shifting like an animal in its sleep. She fled before it could wake. The locked room above. That night the tapping came again. Stronger, more urgent. 3 slow, 2 quick. 3 slow, 2 quick. Eliza pressed the diary against her chest. She wanted to ignore it, but the whisper followed. Eliza, open the room. Free us. She crept into the corridor. The locked door at the end of the hall was trembling, its wood groaning, the handle rattling against the lock. Her flashlight flickered. For a moment she saw shapes moving beneath the crack, fingers clawing at the floorboards. When she leaned closer, a child's voice hissed through the gap. We're waiting for you. Eliza ran. The photograph's days blurred. Marianne wandered the halls, speaking to shadows. Sometimes she laughed, sometimes she wept, sometimes she whispered to people Eliza could not see. In her search for answers, Eliza turned to the attic. Beneath layers of dust, she found a trunk filled with old photographs, black and white images of families who had lived in the house over the decades. All of them smiled stiffly in front of the house, their children standing in crisp dresses or short pants. But as Eliza flipped through the stack, a pattern revealed itself. In every photograph, one child stood slightly apart. Their eyes looked directly into the camera, not with innocence, but with hunger. And in the later photographs, that same child appeared again, unchanged while the families around them had grown older. The final photograph chilled Eliza most of all. It showed Margaret Whitfield standing beside her stern parents on the steps of Blackwood Hill. Behind them in the upstairs window, a pale face stared out. The same child, the one who never aged. The night Marianne vanished. On the 10th night, Marianne disappeared. Eliza woke to the sound of footsteps pacing her corridor. She peeked out to see her mother drifting toward the locked room, eyes wide, lips moving silently. "Mother?" Eliza whispered. Marianne turned. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy. "He's calling me, Eliza." "Your father is calling me." Before Eliza could stop her, Marianne pressed her palm to the locked door. The wood shuddered. The lock clicked. The door creaked open. A blast of cold air surged through the corridor, extinguishing Eliza's flashlight. She screamed as shapes lunged out from the dark. Thin arms, clutching hands. They wrapped around Marianne, dragging her into the room. The door slammed shut. Silence followed. Eliza collapsed against the wall, sobbing. She was alone now, entirely alone. Margaret's warning. Desperate, Eliza returned to the diary. She scoured every page, every margin, every faint scratch. At last she found it. On the inside of the back cover, barely visible under the light, were words carved in frantic strokes. "The house is not built on the hill. The hill is built on the house. The roots go down forever. The voices feed on us. Do not open the lower door. Do not free them. Burn it if you can. End it before it ends you." Her hands shook as she read. There were not one but 2 doors, the locked room above, the carved door below, both connected to whatever fed within the hill. She had already lost her father. She had already lost her mother. If she hesitated, she would lose herself. The descent. Eliza waited until dawn, when the light was strongest, though the mist dulled the sun's rays. She carried a box of matches stolen from the kitchen and a small can of lamp oil she had found in the attic. The basement seemed to welcome her now, its air heavier, its corridors stretching wider than before. The iron ring on the carved door gleamed faintly, as if wet. She poured the oil across the wood, whispering a prayer she half remembered from childhood. Her hands trembled as she struck a match. For an instant, the flame lit the symbols, revealing them in full. They writhed like living things, twisting across the surface. And then the voices screamed. Not whispers, not sighs. Screams, hundreds of them, wailing in unison. The house shook, dust raining from the ceiling.
The House on Blackwood Hill Part 1, The Arrival. The locals called it the house that refused to die. Perched on the crown of Blackwood Hill, the mansion had been empty for decades. The windows were boarded, the gardens strangled with weeds, and the iron gates sagged under the weight of rust. And yet stories lingered. Candlelight seen flickering behind broken panes, silhouettes wandering the halls, faint screams carried by the wind on moonless nights. No one stayed in the house longer than a few days, and those who did were rarely eager to speak of their time there. When the Holloway family arrived on a cool autumn afternoon, the villagers watched from a distance. A young couple, Daniel and Marianne, and their 12-year-old daughter, Eliza. They looked like any other city family seeking the peace of the countryside. Their car rattled up the gravel drive, scattering leaves like startled birds. "Finally," Marianne whispered, peering up at the looming structure. "It's even bigger than I imagined." Daniel forced a smile. He had argued against this purchase, against moving at all, but Marianne had been insistent. She had fallen in love with the idea of restoring an old house, making it their own, writing a new chapter for their family far away from the cramped apartment they had left behind. The house was theirs now, bought cheap, too cheap, almost given away. The key turned stiffly in the lock. The heavy door groaned open as though waking from a long, unpleasant sleep. A smell spilled out, thick and damp, rotting wood, mold, and something metallic underneath, like old blood. Eliza wrinkled her nose but said nothing. Children are often more observant than adults give them credit for, but Eliza had already learned her parents did not like when she mentioned the things she saw and felt. Inside, the air was colder. Dust lay in thick sheets over the furniture, and cobwebs stitched the corners of every room. Yet the grand staircase, the tall ceilings, the intricate woodwork spoke of a time when the mansion had been proud, even beautiful. "Imagine this place once it's restored," Marianne said, her voice too bright, too eager. "It's perfect." Daniel carried the last box inside. Perfect wasn't the word he would have chosen. The first night. They settled into the master bedroom with its tall windows overlooking the overgrown gardens. Eliza's room was at the end of the corridor, small and shadowy. She unpacked her things in silence, listening to the house groan around her. That night, rain began to fall. Wind rattled the shutters. The sound of dripping water echoed in the halls, though there was no leak. Marianne slept peacefully, exhaustion pulling her under. Daniel dozed uneasily, waking at every creak. Eliza lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling. It was then she heard it, a faint tapping like fingernails on wood. She sat up, straining to listen. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the wall near her bed. She touched the wallpaper, cold under her fingertips, and whispered, "Hello?" The tapping stopped. When she lay back down, the whisper came, "Eliza." She froze, heart hammering. The voice was soft, almost like a sigh, but unmistakable. It seemed to seep through the walls themselves. She pressed her hands over her ears until sleep claimed her. Whispers in the walls. Morning brought a pale sun and a thin mist that clung to the hill. Marianne was already in love with the house. She bustled about with a notebook, listing repairs, humming to herself. Daniel inspected the plumbing, muttering about rust and decay. Eliza wandered. The corridors were long and dark, lined with portraits of people whose eyes seemed too alive, too watchful. Some had been slashed, as though by angry hands. One door at the far end of the upper hall was locked tight. Its handle was cold, colder than the rest of the house. Eliza lingered there, a shiver running through her before Daniel's voice called her back. At lunch, she told them about the whisper. Daniel chuckled. "Old houses make noises, that's all." Marianne touched Eliza's hand. "It's just your imagination, darling. You'll get used to it." But Eliza wasn't convinced. That night, the tapping returned, louder this time. She counted the beats, 3 slow taps, a pause, then 2 quick ones. It almost sounded like a pattern, like someone trying to speak. Again, the whisper came, closer now. "Eliza, come play." She hid under her blanket, trembling, until exhaustion stole her consciousness. The diary. On the 3rd day, Eliza discovered the diary. It was hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace of her room, the leather cover cracked and blackened by age. The name etched faintly on the front was Margaret Whitfield, 1923. Eliza read by flashlight under her covers. The entries began innocently enough, descriptions of daily life in the house, of Margaret's strict parents and the endless winters on Blackwood Hill. But soon the tone shifted. There are voices in the walls. Mother says I am imagining them, but I know they are real. They call my name at night. They tell me secrets. The locked room is not empty. I hear footsteps inside when no one is there. Father keeps the key on a chain around his neck. I think he is afraid of what is inside, though he will not say. The last entry was dated November 2nd, 1924. The voices say they will take me tonight. They say the house wants me. If I do not write again, it is because I belong to it now. The page ended there. The rest of the diary was blank. Eliza's hands shook as she closed it. Shadows in the hall. That evening, Daniel announced he had found an old fuse box in the basement. Most of the wiring's shot, but it should hold until we replace it. He didn't notice the smear of black dust clinging to his sleeve, nor how his skin seemed paler than usual. Marianne was too busy scrubbing the kitchen tiles, humming as though she couldn't hear the faint scratching that echoed from the cupboards. Eliza sat silently, clutching the diary in her lap. That night, the rain returned. The whispers grew bolder.